What if governments weren't actually in charge anymore? In this episode of Dose of Dossier, we uncover the silent transformation happening across the Lithium Triangle, where private militaries, not national forces, are enforcing control over the world's most valuable resource. You ever notice how your phone battery feels like it runs your life? Now imagine if I told you there are places on Earth where people are risking and losing control of entire countries just to power that battery. Welcome to the Lithium Triangle, a region so rich in lithium, it holds over half of the world's known supply. Sounds like a blessing, right? Yeah, that's what they thought too. But instead of prosperity, something stranger is happening. Governments are fading into the background, and in their place, private armies, corporate law, and territories that don't belong to any country anymore. This isn't a war you see on the news. This is quieter, cleaner, and way more dangerous. Segment 1. What is the Lithium Triangle? Let's set the stage. The Lithium Triangle stretches across parts of Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. Massive salt flats, endless white landscapes that look like another planet. But underneath that white crust, liquid gold, lithium. The core ingredient in electric vehicles, smartphones, renewable energy storage, basically the future. Countries sitting on this kind of resource should be thriving, but instead they're walking a tightrope between opportunity and exploitation, because lithium isn't just valuable, it's strategic. And when something becomes strategic, it stops being just a resource, it becomes a target. Segment 2. Enter the private militaries. Now here's where things take a turn. Traditionally, governments protect resources. Police, military, national laws, that's how it works. But in parts of the Lithium Triangle, that system is quietly being replaced. Mining corporations are hiring private security forces. Not just guards, we're talking trained ex-military units. Armed, organized, and loyal. Not to a country, but to a contract. Picture this. A salt flat, miles away from the nearest city, no journalists, no oversight, and instead of a national flag flying above it, you've got checkpoints, surveillance towers, and heavily armed personnel controlling who goes in and out. That's not security, that's control. Segment 3. The rise of corporate law. Here's where it gets even more surreal. When private forces take over security, they don't just enforce protection. They enforce rules set by corporations. Workers, local communities, even entire regions begin operating under systems that aren't fully governed by national law anymore. Think about that for a second. Imagine living somewhere where the rules aren't made by elected officials, but by the company extracting resources from your land. It's like a real-world version of those dystopian movies, except nobody's calling it that. They call it efficiency, they call it investment protection, they call it stability. But underneath all those polished words, it's a shift in power. Segment 4. Why governments are stepping back. Now you might be thinking, why would governments allow this? Short answer, they don't always have a choice. Extracting lithium is expensive. Infrastructure, technology, logistics, it's a massive operation. So governments partner with corporations, and slowly, step by step, responsibility starts shifting. First, it's security assistance, then it's operational control, then it's, well, everything. And before you know it, the government isn't really running the show anymore. They're just present, like a background character in their own story. Segment 5. The birth of shadow snakes. This is where things get serious. When corporations control land, security, and resources, what you're left with is something that looks a lot like a state. But it's not recognized, it's not elected, and it's not accountable. These are what analysts are starting to call shadow states. They don't have borders on a map, but they control territory. They don't have citizens, but they control people. And they don't answer to international law in the same way governments do. It's power without the usual limits. Segment 6. Why this affects you. Now you might be thinking, okay, but that's happening far away. Why should I care? Here's why. Every electric car, every smartphone, every battery-powered future we're building runs on lithium. That means global demand is only going up, and wherever demand explodes, control becomes everything. So what's happening in the Lithium Triangle today could become the blueprint for tomorrow, not just for lithium, but for cobalt, water, rare earth minerals, anything the world decides it can't live without. So here's the real question. What happens when corporations don't just influence governments, but replace them? Are we witnessing the next phase of global power, or the quiet erosion of sovereignty? Because if control over resources equals control over the future, then the Lithium Triangle isn't just a region, it's a preview, and the world is watching whether it realizes it or not.